Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, it's not just Labour who are kickstarting their election campaign today. The Green Party of England and Wales, we should say, there's a separate one for Scotland, are launching what they're calling their boldest campaign ever. This afternoon, it's in Bristol. We're joined from the glorious Bristol area there by the party's co-leader, Caroline Lucas. And there she is with that iconic bridge behind her. You must have heard or seen bits of what Mr. Corbyn was saying this morning. Was there anything you disagreed with?
Well, I've actually been on a train for most of the morning, with plenty of delays, so if you wouldn't mind refreshing my memory about what he did say.
Oh, well,
really
I mean, I can't obviously not go through it all, but he talked about wealth extractors, he talked about cosy cartels of people making the rules up to help themselves. He talked about, Mr. McDonald has talked about raising taxes on those over 70,000 a year. It was a pretty standard left-wing agenda, and I just wondered if you disagreed with any of it.
The general thrust.
Yeah.
Certainly I do agree on saying that we need to be moving to a much fairer society. We in Britain have one of the most unequal societies in the whole of Europe. So yes, to that extent, certainly we would want to be making sure that those people on higher incomes are going to be paying more. But I think what's distinctive about the Green Party is not only do we have that analysis and that shared concern about inequality and a real commitment to address inequality, but also we've got that consistent position when it comes to Brexit, unlike Labour. So on Brexit, we're very clear we want to avoid the hardest type of Brexit which Mrs May is pursuing, for which we say she has no mandate. And thirdly, of course, we want to make sure that climate, environmental protection is back up there on the top of the agenda. It really is quite extraordinary how slow people's memories are, how short people's memories are. You know, it wasn't that long ago when people were deeply concerned that last year was the hottest year on record. They seem to have forgotten that now. So we're going to be talking about the importance of investing in green jobs, nowhere more so than here in Bristol, where we're currently in second place. Molly Scott-Cato, our candidate, was currently an MEP, a very experienced politician. And we had last time round an increase from 4% in 2015 up to 27%. Now that is, you know, almost unprecedented in the history of British polling. So we've got a really good chance of winning our first MP here in Bristol West. You've
reached out to Labour and the Lib Dems with talk of a progressive alliance, but they've both rejected your offer. Are you disappointed by that?
I'm deeply disappointed, and people up and down the country, I think, are disappointed because it's yet more of the same kind of politics that puts their own political self-interest above the interests of the country. And I think right now we do face a defining general election, one that absolutely will make key decisions about what kind of country they were going to be. And if we're not very careful, a quick look at the polls suggests that the kind of policies that Mrs May is pursuing are going to ensure that she comes back with maybe a majority of up to 100. I don't think that actually represents what people want in this country. I think it's a result of a very skewed electoral system, which right now
because we don't know it's a result yet.
You know, complete control on. Well, can I just say that right now this government is governing on the basis of less than 24% of the eligible voting for them. So we have a skewed electoral system. That's why we need to be reaching out to other parties to see if we can do our best to avoid the most extreme kind of Tory policies which Theresa May stands for.
Now, you set an interesting precedent, your party in Richmond, in the Richmond by-election, famously won by the Lib Dems, because you stood down. And I'm sure that helped to contribute to the Lib Dem victory there. Will the Green Party, which you've got to concentrate your resources in the areas like where you are now in Bristol, which is fertile territory for you, will you be looking at seats where you, even though they've rejected your progressive alliance formally, you'll look at seats where you can say, well, if we don't stand there, another progressive would have a better chance of winning, so we won't?
Well, I think certainly we would want to see some degree of reciprocity. So what you're not going to see is Green Party people standing down across the country, and you wouldn't expect that. But what I think is exciting, notwithstanding what Jeremy said yesterday, is the fact that up and down the country there is such a desire to try to beat this such a scandalously undemocratic electoral system and to work together to that end. And so many times you have parties from the centre and centre-left fighting each other, and what happens time and again is that the Tories sail through the middle. Surely now, at this critical juncture, when there is so much at stake, when it comes to our public services, when it comes to Brexit, surely now those other parties should be putting aside tribal politics and doing what's best for the country.
I understand the logic, Caroline Lucas. There are 5 Conservative seats which the Lib Dems would have won if Green voters had backed them in the 2015 election. But as you say, it has to be a two-way street, or there's not much in it for you, I guess. But are you having any discussions with Tim Farron or Liberal Democrats about that sort of thing?
But there are discussions going on at all levels, and when you say there's not much in it for us, can I just draw your attention also to somewhere like the Isle of Wight, another of our target seats, which currently is held by a Conservative. You've got UKIP in second place, but Greens are third. They're ahead of both the Lib Dems and Labour. We've got a fantastic candidate on the Isle of Wight, Vix Lothian. She is really admired and respected. She has a very good chance if they were to do something that would be helpful to us.
That's interesting.
So there's a real groundswell of people who want to change this.
So do you think? I understand, and it's because as you say, British politics also always very tribal, that this doesn't happen. Is there a real possibility that in some of the seats with the Lib Dems, where the Lib Dems could win if you weren't there, or where you could win if the Lib Dems weren't there, is that a discussion that we should be looking out for in the next couple of weeks? Is it really a runner?
I think it is a runner because there is such a groundswell of popular opinion for it. My email box is overflowing with people begging for the parties to get together and have some grown-up politics. You've got organisations like Compass, you've got this new organisation by Gina Miller, you've got all kinds of people active in this space saying, how do we have a politics that actually delivers what the majority of people in this country want? And the irony is that our undemocratic electoral system, which gives absolute power to a government on less than 24% of the eligible vote, that is something that is stymieing what the majority of people in this country want, which is decent public services, investment in jobs, investment in the environment.
Except when they had a chance to vote for a change of the electoral system, they didn't take it. But let me just clarify.
Well,
again.
No, if you're going to change it to something that's not much better,
that's fine. That's your view. But they decided not to.
Them.
It could have been the first stage to something what you would regard as better, but they wouldn't even go that way. But if, with discussions with Labour or the Lib Dems, if it's possible to identify, say, 5 seats where if you step back they could do better, maybe win, or 5 seats where if they step back you would do better, you're up for that?
Completely up for that. And I think this idea of stepping back can take many forms. It can be anything as simple as where you decide to put resources, so you're still fielding paper candidates, right through to, one could even perhaps imagine in some place where perhaps enough trust exists to have a kind of an open primary where there's an open democratic decision about who is best placed to fight an extreme Tory. But I think the key thing to say is that this is locally driven. It has to come from what the local people in the local constituencies want, and with public meetings up and down the country, those discussions are being had right now. All right, Caroline Lucas, thank you for joining us there with such a beautiful backdrop. It's been a pleasure. Come and join us. If only I had the time, Caroline Lucas said, come and join us, if only. I've been